Admiral Marcus Holloway's story began in a quiet coastal town where the salty breeze carried dreams as far as the ocean stretched. Born into a modest family, Marcus grew up watching ships sail across the horizon, their flags flapping proudly against the sky. From an early age, he was fascinated by the Navy, not just the ships or uniforms, but the idea of serving something greater than himself. His parents worked hard to make ends meet, and though they didn't have much, they always encouraged Marcus to aim high. "The world will try to tell you what you can't do," his father often said, "but don't let anyone put limits on your dreams." Marcus took those words to heart. In school, he excelled in every subject, especially history and science. He devoured books about naval battles, leaders, and explorers who braved unknown waters. But life wasn't easy for him. As one of the few black students in his class, he faced challenges that went beyond academics. Some kids teased him, while teachers sometimes doubted his abilities, assuming he wouldn't amount to much. Yet Marcus never let negativity bring him down. Instead, he used it as fuel to work harder. When Marcus graduated at the top of his class, he applied to the Naval Academy, a decision that shocked many in his community. Most people from his town rarely left, let alone joined the military. But Marcus had a fire inside him, a determination to prove that talent and hard work could overcome any obstacle. At the academy, he quickly learned that success wouldn't come easily. The rigorous training tested his strength, both physically and mentally. Long nights spent studying were followed by grueling days of drills, and despite his best efforts, prejudice lingered. Some classmates whispered behind his back, questioning whether he truly belonged there. But Marcus refused to give up. He poured all his energy into becoming the best version of himself. Whether it was mastering complex navigation systems or leading team exercises, he pushed himself to excel. Slowly but surely, his peers started noticing. They saw how dedicated he was, how calm under pressure, and how willing he was to help others, even those who hadn't been kind to him. By the time he graduated, Marcus wasn't just respected, he was admired. His rise through the ranks was nothing short of remarkable. Over the years, he held positions of increasing responsibility, earning promotions based on merit rather than favoritism. Along the way, he became a mentor to younger sailors, sharing lessons he'd learned along his journey. His leadership style was unique. He led with compassion, understanding that every person had a story and struggles of their own. This approach earned him loyalty from his crew, who would follow him anywhere. Despite his achievements, Marcus remained humble. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he believed in the power of perseverance. Little did he know, however, that his greatest challenge and triumph was yet to come. The years passed, and Admiral Marcus Holloway's name became synonymous with excellence in the Navy. His reputation stretched far beyond his immediate circle, reaching even the highest levels of command. Yet, despite his accomplishments, there was one milestone that still eluded him: a first-class promotion. This wasn't just any accolade. It was the Navy's way of recognizing individuals who had not only served with distinction, but had also left an indelible mark on the institution itself. For someone like Holloway, who had dedicated his entire life to the Navy, this honor meant everything. When rumors began swirling that he might be nominated for the promotion, excitement rippled through the ranks. Many saw it as a long-overdue acknowledgement of his contributions. Younger sailors whispered about how inspiring it would be to see someone like Holloway achieve such a feat. After all, he wasn't just a brilliant strategist or a fearless leader. He represented hope for anyone who had ever felt overlooked because of their background. If Holloway could break barriers, then maybe others could too. But not everyone shared this enthusiasm. In certain corners of the Navy, resistance brewed quietly. Some senior officers, steeped in outdated beliefs, struggled to accept the idea of a black admiral receiving the highest recognition. They masked their discomfort behind vague excuses, claiming that Holloway lacked certain intangibles or that other candidates were more deserving. These whispers weren't loud enough to stop the nomination process, but they cast a shadow over what should have been a moment of celebration. As the formal review period approached, Holloway tried to focus on his duties, refusing to let speculation distract him. Still, he couldn't ignore the significance of what was at stake. A first-class promotion wasn't just about personal pride. It was about paving the way for future generations. He thought about the young sailors under his command, many of whom looked up to him as proof that hard work pays off. What message would it send if he were denied? Would they doubt themselves, wondering if their efforts would ever truly matter? Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ava Daniels, one of Holloway's most trusted pilots, kept a close eye on the situation. She admired the Admiral deeply, not just for his skills, but for the quiet strength he displayed in the face of adversity. To her, Holloway wasn't just a superior officer. He was a role model. She remembered the first time she met him, when he took the time to personally welcome her aboard his ship. He had asked about her goals, listened to her aspirations, and encouraged her to dream big. Now, seeing the politics surrounding his nomination made her blood boil. The weeks leading up to the decision were tense. Holloway received congratulatory messages from colleagues and friends, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. Even those who supported him couldn't shake the feeling that something might go wrong. And while Holloway maintained his usual calm demeanor, those closest to him noticed subtle changes. He spent longer hours in his office, reviewing files and preparing reports, as though trying to leave no room for criticism. Then came the day everyone had been waiting for, the announcement of the nominations. When Holloway's name appeared on the list, cheers erupted among his supporters. It seemed like the Navy was finally ready to acknowledge his brilliance and dedication. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Behind closed doors, debates raged. Some argued passionately in favor of Holloway, citing his unparalleled record and leadership. Others clung stubbornly to their biases, unwilling to budge. The tension grew thicker with each passing day, setting the stage for a decision that would change lives forever. The day of the decision arrived, and Admiral Marcus Holloway tried to keep his emotions in check. He had been through countless challenges in his career, but this moment felt different. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what his promotion would mean for everyone who believed in fairness, hard work, and equality. Yet as he sat in his office, staring at the stack of papers on his desk, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping into his mind. Deep down, he knew that the Navy's history was marred by biases, and despite how far he'd come, those biases still lingered. When the official letter finally arrived, Holloway opened it with steady hands, his heart pounding. The words on the page hit him like a stormy wave crashing against the shore. His nomination had been denied. There was no clear explanation, just vague language about other considerations and future opportunities. For a moment, he simply stared at the paper, unable to process what he was reading. All the years of sacrifice, all the battles fought both on and off the field, seemed to vanish in an instant. The rejection wasn't just personal. It was a blow to everything he stood for. News of the denial spread quickly, first within the Navy, and then beyond its walls. Social media lit up with reactions. Some people expressed shock, while others voiced anger. Veterans groups began speaking out, questioning how someone with Holloway's record could be overlooked. Journalists dug into the story, uncovering whispers of bias and resistance among certain factions within the Navy. The public outcry grew louder, turning what should have been a quiet administrative matter into a national conversation. For Holloway, the days that followed were a blur. Colleagues approached him cautiously, unsure of what to say. Some offered kind words, while others avoided eye contact altogether, as if embarrassed by the situation. Through it all, Holloway maintained his composure, refusing to let bitterness take hold. But late at night, when the lights were off and the world was silent, he allowed himself to feel the weight of the rejection. He thought about the young sailors who looked up to him, the ones who saw him as proof that barriers could be broken. What message did this send to them? Would they now doubt their own chances of success? Lieutenant Ava Daniels watched the fallout unfold with growing frustration. She had always admired Holloway's ability to rise above challenges, but this time, she couldn't stay silent. Every time she passed his office, she noticed the subtle change in his demeanor. Though he carried himself with the same dignity as always, there was a heaviness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It broke her heart to see someone so deserving treated so unfairly. Daniels began quietly rallying support among her fellow officers. She shared stories of Holloway's leadership, highlighting moments when he had gone above and beyond for his crew. She reminded them of the time he stayed up all night helping a junior sailor prepare for an important exam, or the way he always made time to listen, no matter how busy he was. Slowly but surely, Daniels built a coalition of voices determined to speak out against the injustice. But as the days turned into weeks, Daniels realized that words alone wouldn't be enough. Something bigger needed to happen. Something bold. The Navy had underestimated the power of solidarity, and Daniels was ready to show them just how strong it could be. Little did she know, her actions would soon ignite a firestorm that would leave everyone speechless. Lieutenant Ava Daniels wasn't the kind of person to sit back and watch injustice unfold without doing something about it. From the moment she heard about Admiral Holloway's denied promotion, her mind raced with ideas on how to make things right. She couldn't understand why someone as brilliant, dedicated, and respected as Holloway could be passed over, not when his record spoke for itself. It didn't take long for her frustration to turn into action. Daniels started small, gathering a group of trusted colleagues during breaks or after shifts. At first, they met in quiet corners of the ship's mess hall, away from prying eyes. Over cups of coffee or hastily eaten meals, she shared her thoughts. "This isn't just about Admiral Holloway," she said one evening, her voice firm but calm. "It's about what we stand for as a Navy. If we let this slide, what does that say about us? About our values?" Her words struck a chord with the others, many of whom had their own reasons for admiring Holloway. One by one, people began sharing their stories. A young sailor recalled how Holloway had taken time out of his busy schedule to mentor him when he was struggling with navigation training. Another officer remembered how Holloway had stepped in to mediate a conflict between departments, ensuring everyone felt heard and respected. These anecdotes painted a picture of a leader who wasn't just focused on rules and regulations, but cared deeply about the people under his command. Daniels listened intently, jotting down notes, knowing these stories would be crucial in building their case. As word spread, more sailors joined the effort. Some were hesitant at first, worried about potential backlash if they spoke out. But Daniels reassured them. "We're not asking anyone to risk everything," she explained. "We're simply standing up for what's right. Admiral Holloway has spent his entire career fighting for us. Now it's our turn to fight for him." Her conviction inspired even the most cautious individuals to lend their support. The group decided to draft a letter, a formal statement signed by as many crew members as possible. The letter would outline Holloway's achievements, highlight the unfairness of the decision, and call for transparency in the promotion process. Writing it wasn't easy. They wanted to strike the perfect balance between respect and assertiveness, making sure their message was clear without coming across as confrontational. Daniels worked tirelessly, revising draft after draft, until every word resonated with purpose. While the letter took shape, Daniels also reached out to influential figures outside their immediate circle. She contacted retired officers who had served alongside Holloway, hoping they might add their voices to the cause. To her relief, many were eager to help. One former captain even offered to reach out to higher-ups within the Navy, using his connections to bring attention to the issue. With each passing day, the movement grew stronger, fueled by a shared sense of justice. But Daniels knew that writing letters and gathering signatures wouldn't be enough. They needed to do something visible, something that couldn't be ignored. As she lay awake one night, staring at the ceiling of her bunk, an idea began to form. What if they organized a symbolic gesture, a unified show of support for Admiral Holloway? Something simple yet powerful, like wearing a specific color or pin to signify solidarity. The thought excited her, and she couldn't wait to share it with the group. By now, Daniel's determination had become contagious. Wherever she went, people noticed the fire in her eyes and the urgency in her step. Even those who hadn't initially agreed with her cause found themselves drawn to her passion. Slowly but surely, a wave of change was building, and Daniel's was at its center. Unbeknownst to her, her actions were about to set off a chain reaction that would leave the entire Navy, and perhaps the nation, speechless. The day of the promotion ceremony arrived, and the atmosphere aboard the naval base was tense. The event had been meticulously planned, a grand affair meant to celebrate the achievements of those being honored. Rows of chairs were set up in a large hall, adorned with flags and banners that fluttered gently in the ocean breeze. Officers dressed in their crispest uniforms filed into the room, their polished medals glinting under the bright lights. It was supposed to be a proud moment for the Navy, but for Lieutenant Ava Daniels and many others, it felt hollow. Admiral Marcus Holloway sat quietly near the back of the room, his posture as dignified as ever. Though he wore his uniform with pride, there was an unmistakable heaviness in his expression. He had chosen to attend the ceremony despite knowing his name would not be called. To him, staying away would have felt like surrender, and Marcus Holloway was not someone who gave up easily. Still, every second that passed without acknowledgement weighed on him. Each congratulatory speech, each handshake between senior officers, served as a reminder of what had been denied. Lieutenant Daniels took her seat among the crowd, her hands gripping the edges of her chair tightly. She scanned the room, noticing the mix of emotions on people's faces. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats or avoiding eye contact. Others seemed oblivious to the tension, chatting casually as though nothing unusual was happening. Daniel's heart raced as she replayed her plan over and over in her mind. She knew the timing had to be perfect. If she acted too soon, she risked losing the impact. If she waited too long, the moment might pass entirely. As the ceremony progressed, senior officers took turns stepping onto the stage to announce the promotions. Names were read aloud one by one, accompanied by applause from the audience. When Admiral Holloway's name failed to appear, the silence in the room grew palpable. Daniels could feel the collective disappointment pressing down on everyone. Her chest tightened as she watched Holloway sit stoically, his face betraying little emotion. But she knew better. He wasn't immune to pain, no matter how well he hid it. When the final name was announced and the applause died down, the master of ceremonies began wrapping up the event. "And so," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "we honor these remarkable individuals who exemplify the very best of our Navy." Daniel's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. Without hesitation, she stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement startled those around her, and all eyes turned toward her. For a brief second, Daniels froze. The weight of what she was about to do hit her like a tidal wave. She glanced at Admiral Holloway, who sat motionless, seemingly unaware of what was unfolding. Then she thought of all the sailors who had signed the letter, of the stories they had shared, of the countless hours she had spent preparing for this exact moment. Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped forward, bypassing the rows of chairs until she reached the edge of the stage. The murmurs in the room grew louder as Daniels climbed the steps, her boots clicking sharply against the wooden platform. By the time she reached the microphone, the entire hall was silent. Every pair of eyes was fixed on her, some filled with curiosity, others with confusion, or maybe even disapproval. Daniels took a deep breath, steadying herself. As she gripped the microphone stand, she reminded herself why she was doing this, not just for Admiral Holloway, but for everyone who deserved fairness and respect. Her voice rang out clear and strong, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Before we conclude," she began, her tone calm yet resolute, "there is something that needs to be said." The room held its breath, unsure of what was coming next. Daniels paused for a moment, letting the gravity of her words sink in. Then, with unwavering conviction, she continued, determined to make sure the truth wasn't ignored any longer. Lieutenant Ava Daniels stood at the microphone, her heart pounding but her voice steady. The entire room was frozen in stunned silence, every eye fixed on her as she prepared to speak the words that had been burning inside her for days. She glanced briefly at Admiral Marcus Holloway, who sat motionless near the back of the hall. His expression remained unreadable, but Daniels could see the faintest glimmer of surprise in his eyes. Taking another deep breath, she began. "Before we conclude," she said, her tone firm yet respectful, "there is someone here whose name has not been mentioned today. Someone whose contributions and leadership have shaped many of us in this room. Admiral Marcus Holloway." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience, some people nodding in agreement while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Daniels pressed on, refusing to let the moment slip away. For decades, Admiral Holloway has dedicated his life to serving this Navy, and not just with his actions, but with his character. He has mentored countless sailors, led missions with unmatched skill, and carried himself with integrity even when faced with challenges most of us can't imagine. Yet today, his name was left off the list of honorees, not because he lacked merit, but because there are still barriers in our institution that need to be broken. The room grew quieter, the weight of her words sinking in. Daniel's voice softened slightly, but it carried a quiet power that demanded attention. "We talk about values like honor, courage, and commitment. We wear them on our uniforms and recite them in ceremonies. But how can we claim to uphold those ideals if we fail to recognize greatness when it's standing right in front of us?" Admiral Holloway isn't just a leader. He's proof that resilience and determination can overcome any obstacle. And yet, instead of celebrating him, we've allowed bias and fear to dictate who deserves recognition. Her words struck a nerve. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances, while others nodded solemnly, clearly moved by what they were hearing. Daniels wasn't shouting or accusing. She was appealing to their sense of justice, reminding them of the principles they swore to uphold. Her calm demeanor made her message all the more powerful. "I stand here today, not just for myself, but for everyone who believes in fairness, for every sailor who looks up to Admiral Holloway as proof that hard work should always be rewarded. If we cannot acknowledge his achievements, then what are we fighting for?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air before delivering her final appeal. "This isn't just about one person. It's about who we want to be as a Navy, and as human beings." When she finished speaking, the room erupted into a mix of reactions. Some people clapped loudly, rising to their feet in support, while others sat in stunned silence. A few senior officers frowned, clearly displeased by the disruption. Daniels stepped back from the microphone, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She had done what she came to do, and nothing could take that away from her. Admiral Holloway finally stirred in his seat, his stoic mask cracking just enough to reveal a flicker of emotion. For the first time in days, his shoulders relaxed, and though he didn't smile, there was a newfound lightness in his posture. Whether or not her words changed anything officially, Daniels knew she had given him, and everyone else in the room, a reason to believe in the possibility of change. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, whispers filled the air. No one could stop talking about what had just happened. Some praised Daniels for her bravery, while others criticized her boldness. But one thing was certain. Lieutenant Ava Daniels had sparked a conversation that would echo far beyond the walls of that hall, and perhaps force the Navy to confront truths it had long ignored. The aftermath of Lieutenant Ava Daniels' speech rippled through the naval base like a shockwave. Within hours, news of her bold stand spread far beyond the confines of the ceremony hall. Officers who hadn't attended began asking questions, while sailors whispered excitedly about what they'd heard. Social media buzzed with reactions as videos of Daniels' impassioned words surfaced online. Journalists picked up the story, turning it into national headlines. Navy pilot challenges systemic bias during promotion ceremony. The Navy, usually shielded from public scrutiny, now found itself under intense pressure to address the controversy. For Daniels, the days following the ceremony were a whirlwind. She became both a hero and a target. Admirers praised her courage, calling her a symbol of integrity and justice. Young sailors approached her wherever she went, thanking her for standing up not just for Admiral Marcus Holloway, but for everyone who felt overlooked or undervalued. Some even called her the conscience of the Navy, though she brushed off such labels, insisting she had simply done what was right. But not everyone shared this admiration. Certain senior officers viewed her actions as insubordination, a breach of protocol that undermined authority. Behind closed doors, heated debates erupted about how to handle the situation. Should Daniels face disciplinary action? Could ignoring her stunt set a dangerous precedent? Tensions ran high, and Daniels knew she might pay a price for speaking out. Still, she remained unapologetic. "If I have to choose between doing what's easy and doing what's right," she told a close friend, "I'll always pick the latter." Amid the chaos, Admiral Holloway kept a low profile. He appreciated Daniels' bravery more than words could express, but he didn't want to overshadow her efforts by drawing further attention to himself. Privately, however, he admitted that her speech had reignited something within him, a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in weeks, he felt hopeful. If one person's voice could spark such widespread discussion, maybe real change was possible after all. Public pressure mounted as the story gained traction. Veterans organizations, civil rights groups, and even members of Congress weighed in, demanding answers from Navy leadership. Petitions circulated online, urging officials to reconsider Holloway's promotion. News outlets interviewed retired officers and military experts, many of whom condemned the decision as unjust. The narrative shifted from being solely about Holloway to highlighting systemic issues within the armed forces. People began questioning whether similar biases had affected other promotions, and how many talented individuals had been unfairly sidelined over the years. Faced with mounting scrutiny, Navy leaders held emergency meetings to discuss their next move. Some argued that reversing the decision would appear weak or reactive, while others insisted it was necessary to restore trust and credibility. After days of deliberation, an announcement came. Admiral Holloway's case would be reviewed once again. Though no promises were made, the acknowledgement alone signaled progress and gave hope to those advocating for him. Meanwhile, Daniels faced her own challenges. Her commanding officer summoned her to a private meeting, where she was reprimanded for stepping out of line during the ceremony. But instead of backing down, Daniels stood firm. "Sir," she said calmly, "if my actions cause discomfort, I apologize. But I won't apologize for defending what's right." Admiral Holloway deserved better, and so does our Navy. To her surprise, her commander nodded thoughtfully, offering no further punishment. It seemed even those in power recognized the importance of her message. As weeks turned into months, the impact of Daniels' defiance continued to grow. Conversations about diversity and inclusion gained momentum across military branches. Training programs were updated to address unconscious bias, and new initiatives were introduced to ensure promotions were based on merit rather than outdated prejudices. While change wouldn't happen overnight, the seeds of transformation had been planted, and Daniels' courage had helped sow them. Through it all, Holloway watched quietly, his respect for Daniels deepening with each passing day. He realized that her boldness had not only given him a second chance, it had also inspired countless others to believe in fairness and accountability. Together, they had started something bigger than either of them could have imagined. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear: their fight was far from over. Months after Lieutenant Ava Daniels' courageous stand, the Navy made a decision that no one could have predicted just weeks earlier. In an unprecedented move, Admiral Marcus Holloway was officially awarded the first-class promotion he had been denied. The announcement came quietly at first, a brief statement released to the press, but its impact was anything but subtle. For many, it felt like a long overdue victory, proof that persistence and integrity could still triumph over bias and tradition. The ceremony to honor Holloway was held on a crisp morning, with clear skies stretching endlessly above the naval base. This time, the atmosphere was different, lighter, more hopeful. Officers and sailors gathered in large numbers, their faces glowing with pride, as they awaited the moment they had fought so hard for. When Holloway stepped onto the stage, wearing his dress uniform adorned with medals earned over decades of service, the crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and filled with admiration. Even those who had once doubted him now stood shoulder to shoulder with his supporters, acknowledging the magnitude of what he represented. As Holloway accepted the insignia signifying his new rank, he paused to scan the room. His eyes landed briefly on Lieutenant Daniels, who stood near the front, her expression a mix of relief and joy. Without hesitation, he gestured for her to join him on stage. The audience murmured in surprise, but Daniels hesitated only for a moment before stepping forward. As she reached his side, Holloway turned to address the crowd. "I am deeply humbled by this recognition," he began, his voice steady but warm. "But I want to make one thing clear. This moment does not belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who believed in fairness, who refused to accept injustice, and who stood up, even when it was hard." He glanced at Daniels, then back at the audience. Lieutenant Ava Daniels reminded us all of what true leadership looks like. She risked everything to speak the truth, and because of her courage, we are stronger today. Daniels blushed under the spotlight, clearly unaccustomed to being the center of attention. But as Holloway continued, praising her determination and selflessness, she allowed herself a small smile. The applause grew louder, echoing across the open space as if carried by the wind itself. It was a rare moment where everyone present, regardless of rank or background, felt united by something greater than themselves. In the months that followed, the ripple effects of their actions became undeniable. The Navy implemented sweeping reforms aimed at addressing systemic biases, including updated evaluation processes and mandatory diversity training for all personnel. Young sailors entering the ranks found inspiration in stories of Holloway's resilience and Daniels' bravery, knowing that change was possible if they dared to challenge the status quo. Statues were erected in their honor, commemorating two individuals who had shown that even in the face of adversity, truth and justice could prevail. For Holloway, the promotion marked both a personal milestone and a broader mission. He used his elevated position to advocate for inclusivity within the Navy, ensuring that others wouldn't face the same struggles he had endured. Daniels, meanwhile, became a symbol of empowerment, invited to speak at events and mentor young officers eager to follow in her footsteps. Though neither sought fame or recognition, their legacy stretched far beyond their individual careers. Years later, when historians looked back on this chapter, they saw more than just a story of overcoming discrimination. They saw a testament to the power of unity, courage, and unwavering belief in doing what's right. And while Admiral Holloway and Lieutenant Daniels eventually retired from active duty, their names and their fight would forever remain etched in the annals of history, inspiring generations to come.